So first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Phil Stage, the state chairman for the Department of Defense Program Employers for the Guard and Reserve. I'm also a retired Army colonel, having served on active duty in the Guard and the Army Reserve. And I'd really like to thank you all for attending our inaugural Employee Advisory Committee meeting. So this is the very first of what we hope will be something we can do at least on a semi-annual basis. Now, the California ESGR Committee wants to improve our communication with both the nearly 57,000 Guard and reservists in the state and you employers who support them. We hope that our participation on this committee can help us improve our support and communications with both our military and employer partners. I'd like to introduce our ESGR participants. First of all, our national chair, Judge Ron Bogle, whom I'll formally introduce shortly. Jim Combs, who's the California ESGR Chair Emeritus. He was my predecessor, and he directs the Navy Reserve component currently. Joe Biscacci, the Vice Chair for California ESGR, and my co-host. Patrick Morrissey, who's the Director for Employer Outreach for California ESGR, the West, and seems like the nation. Dr. Liz Dietz, who's the Bay Area Chair for ESGR, is supposed to be signing on. And we've got Tayana Alvarez and Scott Cosley, our volunteer support technicians from Los Alamitos and Sacramento. Our service partners, Alicia Grady, the Director of the Private-Public Partnership, the P3O office out of the Army Reserve, is supposed to be signing on. She had another meeting. And we've got Matt Lancaster from Northern California, who's the P3O lead there. Master Sergeant Melody Paver from the Soldier for Life, an Army initiative, is supposed to be signing on, as well as Jason Cameron from the California Military Department, the Work for Warriors program. Our military partners, we're blessed to have Major General Miles Davis, the commander of the 63rd Readiness Division, Army Reserve, with a headquarters in Mountain View, just down the road. Rear Admiral Robert Nowakowski, as Vice Commander of the 5th Fleet, he's in Bahrain. Has an 11-hour time difference. He was hoping to sign in. And we just got Brigadier General Jeff Smiley's aide signing in for the general who's in another meeting. He's commander of the California Army National Guard. We do have Captain Joanna Hagel from the Coast Guard, who's the Pacific Area Reserve Chief of Staff and the Senior Reserve Officer there. We were hoping to get Colonel Victor Teal, the commander of the 129th Air Wing. That's an air rescue wing out of Moffett Field in Northern California with the Air Guard, and his vice, Colonel Jeremy Gonet. So we've got Lieutenant Colonel Cole Clements from the Marine Corps, who's calling in for Colonel Quentin Jones, who's the commander. We were going to have Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Lawler, who's the Secretary General Staff for the 63rd, as well as Command Sergeant Major Patrick McKee, Senior Enlisted Advisor for the 63rd. And the Command Sergeant Major, thanks again for joining us. So our employer partners, Rosa Sanchez from Intuit, the Talent Marketing Senior Marketing Manager, Bryson Menke from Intuit, Senior Manager, Learning and Development, and Christine Bastain, Western Digital, Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer. We just gave her a Patriot Award recently. Unable to attend, but RSVP'd, was Chris Spencer from Oracle and Jeff Hamill from Google, who's the Director of Industry Partners, and Michael St. Germain, he's a reservist lead for the Veterans Program at Google, and he's currently in Australia with Google doing his work there. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker, and that is Judge Ron Bogle. And here's a little bit on his bio. It was pages long, so I'm going to abbreviate it. Sorry, Ron. So,
apologies necessary.
Judge Bogle was appointed National Chair of Employers for the Guard and Reserve by the Secretary of Defense effective October 1st, 2019. As National Chair, Judge Bogle leads ESGR, and I says Department of Defense program, in its mission of facilitating and promoting a cooperative culture of employer support for National Guard and Reserve service. And I'll just say that we have about 3,700 volunteers in 54 different states and communities. Prior to this appointment, he served as state chair for North Carolina, and he did that until September 30th, 2019. He's a retired North Carolina Superior Court judge. He earned a degree in political science from Georgetown College, and upon graduation, he served on active duty in the United States Army and is a veteran of the Vietnam War. On discharge from active duty, he attended the University of Louisville School of Law, graduating with a Juris Doctorate degree. He later resumed military service in the reserve component. I don't know which one that was. Are you a general, sir?
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, we always think of you as one. That's okay. Following retirement from judicial service, Judge Bogle was nationally recognized leader and advocate in public health office to reduce underage drinking and drug abuse. In addition to his many years of ESGR service, Judge Bogle has served on numerous local, state, and local boards and commissions. And I will just leave it at that, sir, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Phil. And it is indeed an honor for me to have the opportunity to be here with you. You know, this has been a year of celebration for ESGR in a lot of ways. One thing we're celebrating certainly has been the reduction in COVID interference with our business that got in the way of much of what we do, and we're so proud to do in support of the men and women serving in the nation's Guard and Reserve. But it's also a year where we celebrated our 50th anniversary at the Pentagon this year in June. We are serving as a program of the Defense Department. And so it is important that, to me anyway, that I have the opportunity to be with you today and talk a little bit about the importance of improving ESGR support and communications, both with our employers, who are really the centerpiece of our outreach effort, and their military leadership, who both of whom really so it sort of encapsulate the challenge for us to really best and most effectively and most efficiently support the men and women who serve in the nation's Guard and Reserve. I'm a student of history, and I want to tell you just a little bit about history of ESGR, and so that you'll understand who we are and what we do and why we do it. We were created in 1972, established by executive order of President Nixon, as they eliminated the military draft, going to an all-volunteer service. And you can be sure in 1972, in the shadow of the Vietnam War, that there were some serious doubters about the possibilities of a all-volunteer force. It was a war in which our nation's politicians had heard the protests over a very unpopular war. When I came home in 1970, they were telling many of us when we got on that big golden bird, that silver bird to fly home, don't wear your military uniform, because there are many people out there who don't care much for that uniform that you wear. That world does not exist today. And the employment world challenges that existed in 1972 do not exist today. And I'm not going to say to you that they're all because of what ESGR has done, but I will say to you that ESGR has been a serious player over the last 50 years in changing the dynamics of the nation's employers, and their support for the men and women who serve with the nation's Guard and Reserve. Many doubters did not believe that the all-volunteer force would succeed. If anything has been verification of the decision by our lawmakers in this great experiment in democracy, it's the last 20 years of the global war on terror. And the success of our nation's forces with the Guard and Reserve now making up about 40% of our total force. And there is no degrees of separation, and studies have shown this, there's no degrees of separation between the reserve component and the active force. And one of the things that we've learned is that not only did going to an all-volunteer force eliminate a body of people who would otherwise be drawn into military service, it also, we understood in going to an all-volunteer force that this nation could not meet its future national defense needs without a backfill for those people that we were losing. And so the place they looked, and reasonably looked, was in the direction of the Guard and Reserve. And this meant that we had to ensure that we had the most highly skilled, well-trained, and most professionally led group of service members in the Guard and Reserve to do the job and meet the responsibilities the nation expected of them. But we also understood in that equation was that this was not only creating friction and greater responsibilities upon the service members, it was also increasing friction in the workplace, where that inherent friction that exists between absence from military service and responsibilities and duties within the workplace were things that had to be dealt with. And so they established ESGR for doing just exactly that. Jim Roche was our first national chair of ESGR in 1972. At that time, he was the CEO and president of Ford Motor Company. They appointed a board of directors of the most prominent and influential business leaders that this nation has produced in order to convey the message about support for the military. But this is really a boots on the ground operation, and they were busy people, and they ultimately shifted to a strategy in which we said, let's make this really a unique organization within the Department of Defense that will be boots on the ground, will be volunteers, people who may or may not have served in the military in the past, but who have a passion for supporting our men and women who are standing in defense of our nation. And our mission, as Phil has said, was to work with our nation's employers to help foster the kind of relationship between our employers and the hiring of the Guard and Reserve, in which they valued that hiring and also supported that military service. And we do it with our volunteers. They are the heart and soul of what we do within ESGR. I too am a volunteer, have been a volunteer for many years, proud to do it, proud of my service with ESGR, which has been somewhere between 15 to 20 years. And it is a great honor and opportunity for me to have that time to serve. But we do it. The thing that brings our volunteers is probably total uniformity, in that it is a passion for the people who put on that uniform and the desire to support and serve them. But ironically, they're best served, if you look at it, when we look at our mission, our total numbers of outreaches, both to service members and to the military, our numbers would reflect that our greatest outreach really is to the service members. In fact, it's about 3 to 4, 5 times our greater number of outreach to service members than there are to our employers. Now, there's reasons for that, and that is, in part, if you're in the service, you know this, but the service members in the reserve component, the Guard and Reserve, are required to have annual briefings, and we do those things, and we do them in a lot of other occasions like deployments and returns from deployment. But the other side of it is that that really, in my opinion, when I saw those numbers, I frankly was shocked by them, that we had such a more powerful numeric outreach to our service members instead of our employers. And so we've established and we've gone through a series of transformation within this past year, led by Jim Combs as the chair of an ad hoc committee that I established within ESGR to enhance our employer outreach. As far as I'm concerned, those numbers are upside down, and we will be making a far greater effort to engage more effectively, more efficiently, and more economically with our nation's employers. But the reality of it is we deal with both. And we do that for one reason, and that's to best support the members of the Guard and Reserve and their families. And it's important to understand that if you're not part of the military, what an important part of our overall national defense that they are. The debate is settled. Long ago, the debate was whether the Guard and Reserve was a strategic force to be called up only in the event of World War or something of that consequence, or are they an operational force? And the global war on terror has certainly ratified the fact that they are today an operational force and included in part and parcel of all of our national strategic plan, defense plan for the nation, includes the Guard and Reserve. And they are critical to the defense of this nation. So that debate for us is settled. And so when our work with ESGR has really, in particularly with the burden that's been placed on our personnel in the Guard and Reserve, and along with that, with their employers, is really to extend our outreach to employers. And you know that Tom Brokaw, former news commentator, once made the statement that it's easy to make a buck in America, but it's much more difficult to make a difference. And so I would say to our nation's employers that you are a critical element. Your support is critical to the decision of our service members, one, to stay in the Guard and Reserve, so that you make a direct contribution to our nation's national defense. And you may not think of this yourself in this way, but you are important partners in our national defense. And without your support, it would be very difficult for your citizen warriors to continue to serve in the Guard and Reserve and continue to stand in defense of our nation. So you contribute directly to their retention in the service, and you contribute directly as employers to their readiness to serve when called. So you are making an incredible difference to the nation in the support that you provide. And that's what we with ESGR are here to accommodate you with, to help you in any way possible that we can, to lighten your load. We know that there are frictions that occur between you. We've worked with employers before. We've got great military leaders in this country serving the Guard and Reserve, and they are a ready resource to help you. If you've got questions, concerns, problems about that, they're also available to talk with you. I'm not going to commit them to anything. I'll only talk in terms of ESGR's responsibility. But many of the time, we've referred people, employers who have questions or concerns about the service directly to the employers, to the service members' units. So I just want to say to you employers out there, thank you for what you do in support of the nation. And thank you for what you do to support the men and women who are employed by you. I'm going to a Freedom, I'm luxuriating in a Hampton Inn here in Colorado Springs and heading for a Freedom Award presentation ceremony, as Phil mentioned, a little later today. And, you know, I happen to serve on the National Selection Board for our Freedom Award recipients. One of the things that we do is look for ways to recognize the contribution that's being made by our employers across the nation. And the Freedom Award is officially called the Secretary of Defense Employer Support Freedom Award. It is the highest award given in the nation to an employer for their support of their Citizen Warrior Guard and Reserve employees. And we've been doing this now for 25 years. That's another one of our celebrations here within ESGR. And in that 25 years, only 325 have actually received the Freedom Award. We receive thousands of nominations each year, but only 15 awards have given you. And I can tell, been given out to employers, but I can tell you that the competition is ferocious, and particularly among our large employers. And as they strive to obtain one of these awards. But I'm just going to say this in wrapping up. You know, in the active force, we have robust groups of for family support of our service members who are in the active component. Not so much so with our reserve force personnel, but in reality, from reading the Freedom Award nominations and the things that receive Freedom Awards, is that we find out that employers are actually becoming that resource and support for service members. They go mow lawns, they make repairs at homes, they take care of children, they give the remaining spouse some time away, just so many things that it just makes you so proud of what the employers of this nation are doing to support our Guard and Reserve. So, Phil, I'm not going to speak any longer. I'm going to do what I used to tell lawyers to do, and that's to sit down and shut up and let you folks get on with your business. So, but thank you for the opportunity for letting me be part of this event.
Great. Thank you, Judge Vogel. It was great to have the chairman for the entire country lead off our inaugural meeting. So
may I say something, please? Ron,
you just did.
Thank you. Ron, you said everything that is absolutely true. One of the other things, though, is that we actually support the family members. And that is really one of the most important things, because sometimes our silly military people do not communicate well with their own families. And so we are able to do that along with the employers. So really, as a veteran myself and as a wife of a husband who's a veteran, it's really important that the families understand what's happening. And I totally agree with everything you said, and I thank you.
Yeah.
I think we all do, Liz. Thank you very much for your comment.
Pleasure.
We are always knowing that Liz will have a comment or two. So anyway, without further ado, I'd like to hand the program over to Joe Biscazzi, our vice chair, who's got some military member questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Phil. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. To me, it's a very utmost type of honor to participate with Judge Vogel, to have is General Smiley on from the California Army National Guard. He's not on yet. Oh, you are. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking your time. Major General Davis, Sergeant Major McKee of the 63rd Readiness Division, thank you for being part of this today. And to the Marines, Colonel Clemens, happy birthday. We in the Army have great respect for our Marine Corps fellow types of individuals who serve and hit the beaches without any problem at all. But what I'd like to do this morning is break down questions that I would like to ask of the military and then of our employers. And I'll start off with the military, and anyone in the military who would like to respond, please do so. My first question is, what types of challenges do our employers face when their employees, of course, train, whether it be annual training, whether it would be battlefield assemblies? How does it negatively affect the companies who support their employees. Would anyone like to address how we have the challenges of training and taking away from the company their employees? Anyone would like to respond? Sergeant Major McKee?
Sure, Joe. You know, I'm always, I guess I'm kind of like Liz. I always have something to say. So, hey, first of all, it's an honor to be here with all of you. And I'm going to speak not necessarily for the division, but more for myself. When I was a traditional reserve soldier, I was a high school teacher. And sometimes the duty pulled me away from, my classroom. And I know that created a burden on both my students and the school itself, because, I wasn't there to do certain things. And so, planning a substitute, doing those kind of things, lesson plans being, maybe off kilter depending on when the duty was. What we try to do in the military to help, at least in the reserve component, to help our employers really give, to make it a little easier, is we try to get the training schedules a year in advance. And so, in other words, the soldier, knows that they have these number of days they have to do on these dates. And we give those to those soldiers in advance, and sometimes up to 2 years in advance. We really try to lean forward. And the employee can take that to their employer and say, hey boss, here's my schedule for the next, year. And these are the days that I'm not going to be able to be, at work. And I think if it's planned enough, I think it lessens the burden on the employer. And I think that's really critical. And that's an obligation, I think, that every citizen soldier has, to share that with their employer, to really say, here's when I have my military duty. And then if there's conflicts, whatever that may be, then there's time to discuss it and solve those issues in advance. I know, talking to employers, most of the time what they tell me is, hey, aren't you guys planning this stuff out in advance? They come the day before on Friday and say they got to be gone the next day. That's not quite how it works. There's maybe some irresponsibility there. And so we have to work through those things. But I think if we can, encourage our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coasties, and, even Guardians now, the Space Force, we encourage them to just lean forward and really participate by giving that schedule to their supervisor in advance, months in advance. It's better. Now, those things, national security wise, when things come up, Joe, I can't do anything about those. Unfortunately, I don't have a leash on, for example, KJU or Vladimir Putin. I can't yank him and say, hey, hold back. We got some work to do here in California. Stop rattling your saber. But we do all we can to make sure that we provide some stability for our employers. I guess that'd be my best answer. Over.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Major McKee. General Smiley, do you have anything to add? Okay. Anyone else would like to come in? By the way, when the Sergeant Major talks about trying to work schedules, I'm also an ESGR ombudsman, and I'm a trained mediator. So if any type of problem does come up and it gets to a point of needing mediation, as a trained mediator, I do go in to try to work things out with the employer. And of course, we always look for the employer because the employee needs a job and we need to ensure that occurs. And of course, Liz says the family's involved with that too. Anybody else like to add?
Hey, Joe, I'm sorry. It's General Smiley. I pushed the wrong button there. So, I want to cap everything Sergeant Major said. The National Guard operates the same way. We publish training guidance out of my headquarters about 2 years in advance. And so our subordinate commands, which is where the interlink is between our employers and our interface with our soldiers, they're operating at the minimum with about 16 months to 14 months of a drill schedule and annual training dates that are out there. But I'd like to also caveat one of the philosophies I have with here in California in our formations is we're into it for soldier of life. And, I need to keep our soldiers, preferably for 20 and those at the senior level that run out to 30 years. I talk to our commanders all the time, that when we need a conflict with a particular employer and we're looking at the long run of things, I ask our commanders to really, take a look at what's going on there, because if we suit a particular drill, what is really the impact and the risk to our training, and then what is the risk to being able to sustain that soldier out over 20 and 30 years. And so I ask my commanders always, there's sometimes we just cannot relieve a person from a specific training event because of the amount of risk and the requirements for that person to be there. But over a period of time, over a 4-year enlistment or 6-year enlistment, over a 10 or 20-year enlistment or our contract or service to us, look, we can, I used to have an ice plant factory when I was a brigade commander down in Fresno, and that ice plant did their business, in the summer, and it was always in conflict. And I was able to, and I had over, in one mortar platoon, I had, I think 9 employees with this ice plant. And so I was able to make some adjustments and schedule that particular mortar platoon in certain years off of that particular ice plant, because we had a really good agreement between us and them. And, they understood a national deployment, but, the AT periods, and I was able to, keep my qualifications and standards with that particular platoon and keep my relationship with that ice plant. And they kept producing more, 11 Charlie mortarmen for me. So I just tell you, we can work with employers in certain areas and certain things. It's a give and take. And, you just got to communicate with us. And if you're not aware, of the particular company command team, don't hesitate to reach out to an ESGR rep who can make contact with us. And sometimes we can find a solution that's in the best interest for both the employers and us. That's all I have, over.
Thank you very much, General Smiley. That sort of leads into my second question. Can employers become part of a reservist career training program? And
Joe, excuse me. General Davis has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to tell me that. I did not see it. General Davis, my apologies, sir. Good morning.
Oh, no, Joe. Don't. No problem at all. I just wanted to echo the piece we talked about, the predictability, because I think that's key. And I think one of the greatest challenges we have right now is because people don't see our nation at war. So when they continue to see this high op tempo, they don't, there's not a connection with it. Hey, we're done with that. Why is it so that communication on to continue to explain with them, what's happening in the world and why that high demand on the soldiers still exists. And then I want to kind of tag on to what General Smiley was just talking about. Especially, I'm concerned about when we talk about those junior leaders, those captains, those majors, those E5s and E6s. We're trying to really watch really hard. I mean, we're watching everybody, but really paying attention to them, because they're going through that time where they've got the growth in the family, they're really starting to develop their career. So trying to make sure that all our leaders up and down the chain understand that and are working with them to help make it work both ways. Because, if we don't, we won't continue to keep them here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for adding on to General Smiley. And I personally believe I was a drilling reservist starting in 64, not 1864, but 1964. And I also cared about being a soldier for life even then. when I came in as an E1. And I personally believe that a partnership between employers and employees that are members of the Guard and Reserve can work together and to enhance both the civilian as well as the military careers. And this is so important. Probably something that has been part of it deals with job fairs and finding jobs for our guardsmen and reservists who are underemployed or unemployed. And we've seen some changes in our economy over the last, I'd say, 14 years since the debacle of 2008. Can General Smiley...
Excuse me, Joe.
Yes.
Captain Heigl has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies, ma'am. Please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Captain Joanna Heigl, thanks for having us and everything that the ESGR does. I lead many reserve personnel, and you are a great resource to all of us. And I know that many of my Coast Guardsmen have used your services and help with civilian employment and others. One of the things I try to do, we have our annual schedule that we put out. And sometimes I've had folks come to me and say, hey, can we adjust this? And where we can, we try to adjust those schedules and make up additional, sorry, I'm getting an incoming call here, to make up those drill days. And then the other, so there's those annual schedule, and then there's the emergencies that come up, right? For Coast Guard, it's hurricanes or oil spills or those sorts of things. And some of them, if they're long-term, we can work with the individual, like, hey, we've got these different waves of deployments, and they may come back and say, I can't do it during this time, but I am available during this time. And then if we can, we try to work with them in that regard. As far as training programs, there's a website called DoD Cool, which is credentialing opportunities online, which helps you take your military experience and turn it into kind of civilian licenses or civilian certificates. And that's a great program that we can use, that I think employers and employees can use that. Over.
Thank you very much, Captain Heigl.
Joe?
Yes,
I think one of the things that have been picked up in the entire conversation is communication. So it is truly important that we communicate with our military and families, but also with the other activities that we do with the employers. And Captain Heigl, I am a volunteer with another organization, and so I get to go over to Alameda all the time to brief the outgoing cutters. And the Coast Guard really does a fantastic job, and they're all over the place. Apparently, we have a lot of ocean out there. Didn't know that.
Thank you very much, Liz. Here's some questions for our employers. Do you have a military leave policy when your employees are called to active duty? Would anyone that's on here like to mention that? Anyone would like to? I do know it's very common now, as of course much more in regards to larger corporations. For example, Qualcomm has a great program, and Admiral Nowakowski, by the way, a member of the Navy Reserve and an employee of Qualcomm, sits on that group and has resulted in quite a lot of positive things for individuals or member of the Guard and Reserve at Qualcomm. But anyone that's on there, do you have a military leave policy?
Would either of the representatives, either from Intuit or Western Digital, like to address that?
Oh, Hello, it's Christine Baston here from Western Digital.
Oh.
Apologies, I am struggling a little bit with Zoom, and I apologize also for not being able to turn on my video. I have a privacy setting that I'm unable to shift. But it's good to be with all of you here today and to listen to the dialogue. And we do have actually a policy, a documented one. It's available and visible to all of our employees. And I think the conversation that you're having in the inquiry that Joe, that you've made with the various members is spot on relative to communication. We do provide for all eligible employees appropriate advance notice, the reasonable accommodation for individuals to be able to take a military leave for a maximum cumulative period of not more than 5 years. And again, there's, there could be some limitations around that. Depends on the role. Employees on leave for 30 days or less, need to report to work on the first regular workday that falls 8 hours after the end of a calendar year. Upon the employee's return. But we do have a pretty well documented, very well detailed approach to this, because we also recognize that there is a need for flexibility. But as you can tell, even in our own corporate policy, we are very much advocating the importance of advance notice.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christine, for bringing that in. Miss seeing you. That's a good point. And, we would be glad to assist any company, whether it be of 5 employees or 50,000 employees, in setting up military leave policies. We do have samples that we can do and can offer any assistance whatsoever in that. Probably the last thing I'll ask of employers, do you have a Guard and Reserve hiring program? In other words, looking for guardsmen and reservists as employees. They make excellent employees in that they're able to balance if they're married or if they have other types of duties in their lives, taking care of their elderly parents. They can balance things in many ways. And that's what makes them so valuable as employees. Do you have any type of positive hiring program of guardsmen and reservists when you go out to the agencies that you utilize to gain them?
Hi, this is Rose at Intuit. We definitely do that both on the active duty as well as the veteran as well as the military spouse sides. So we partner with a couple different organizations to do events like hiring fairs or virtual webinars to promote all of the different roles that we have. We have a number of remote roles on the tax and bookkeeping side. So we often have some families who need to PCS. And so that is definitely something that we've had to put into our process, and it's pretty easily transferable. So, if they're working remote, they may just be working one day, and then if they have to PCS, as long as they talk with their supervisor about that, then they're able to take the time off that they need. And then for our corporate roles, it's also similar whether they are remote or in the office. So it's definitely something that our group is highly encouraging of.
Rosa, thank you for your input. Very positive, and maybe we could work together if you hold any type of job fairs, that we could have a table there also to assist any company in that regard. That in essence are the questions that I asked both of military and employer, and I do thank you all for your input. Phil, back to you.
Sorry, this is Captain Heigl. Can I make a quick?
Captain Heigl, please.
Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to piggyback on the job fair. One of the things that we do is the transition assistance program for military members that are leaving active duty and going whether into the reserve or just on the civilian side. So I think there may be opportunity there, if it hasn't happened already, for companies maybe to participate in that TAPS class if they're looking to hire veterans. And I know also on Coast Guard Island in Alameda, through the base Alameda, that they've had some job fairs there where they've had different companies come in to be able to talk about opportunities for folks, again, leaving active duty. Over.
This is an interesting point. We are working with the Veterans Administration Hospital in Palo Alto, in which they are training corpsmen leaving active duty, Navy primarily, your corpsmen, in which if they leave as a corpsman, they can actually go, and it's funded by the Veterans Administration to get them their RN degree. And that has many types of good results. Number one, we need a lot of RNs, and the demand right now is for the college degree RNs, as we know, the BSN, since I've been in healthcare. But if you're interested, Captain Heigl, I'd be glad to bring you into that discussion with the VA Palo Alto, with maybe some of your corpsmen who may be leaving and during that the TAP type of process, getting into this type of program, because Navy corpsmen are very competent in that they serve on ships and have more responsibility than Army corpsmen.
Joe, I'd like to add something.
Yes, Liz.
As a professor emerita from San Jose State in the School of Nursing, it's really important, yes, to connect with the Veterans Administration, but it's also important that they connect with reputable schools and that they, in fact, understand prerequisites and other kinds of things. I certainly am available at any time to advise anyone regarding nursing within the state of California. And I can, in fact, hook up with other programs out of California, because there are some things that the boards of registered nursing coordinate and control that, in fact, the VA may not know.
Thank you very much, Liz. Phil, back to you.
Yeah.
Well, Sergeant Major McKee has his hand up.
Okay. My apologies. I'm dog sitting and my puppy's barking.
Joe, that's okay. So I guess I just would add, and thank everyone for what they said. I just wanted to say that when we talk about employment, the Guard and Reserve is a great opportunity for employers to really find a pool of talent that is right there for them, that lives in the communities where they're at, and who is reliable, responsible. I mean, all those things that we teach in the military. And they're right here for you. And so I think the partnerships, whether it's formal through CSP, which is through the Transition Assistance Program, or whether that's a private-public partnership that we'll probably talk about a little bit later, where you're tapping those current serving Army Reserve soldiers. I mean, it's just a great pool for employers to find people to fill their ranks, because I know there's a war for talent right now, but the military really isn't a competition for that.
Meetings, so I'm here now.
We're more of an asset for the employers, vice something that should draw away from your talent. So just a thought. Thanks.
Phil, if there's no one else contributing, please take it on.
Thank you. Well, we just had Brenda join us, so I don't know if she has any comments she'd like to make. She disappeared. So anyway, at this point, we were going to talk with our with our employer partners and also with our military partners. So starting off, first of all, with P3O. Matt, I think you're the one rep we have from P3O with us. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your program and what are the things that you can do for transitioning soldiers? Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Sergeant Major, for kind of cueing that in too. When he talks about there being a war for talent, he's absolutely right. And among the pool that's the most sought after, for sure, are our military members, especially our currently serving military members. Some of what the P3O program does is that we partner with employer partners, and we set up a network with our employer partners. And in order to sort of cut out the middleman in the process, we have our network, and we utilize that network to connect them directly with our soldiers in the Army Reserve, and we also do spouses as well as dependents in some cases. So the war for talent is for sure out there. Obviously, the economy is turning; you can never tell. But right now, some of the things that crossed my desk, if I would have known about it, 9-10 years ago, I would have jumped all over it as a 25-year-old serving in the Guard or the Reserve. So there are a lot of opportunities out there, and P3O has a network of employers that we're utilizing to really give service members a leg up, as well as their spouses and their dependents. So, and I know Brenda jumped on as well. I don't know if she has anything, but yes, thank you for having us.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Sergeant Major, I apologize. I call you General. You were talking and your name just came out of my mouth. But yeah, no, I agree with Matt. We are essentially the bridge for the civilian entities that want to hire our Army Reserve. I think that the partnership is going great, and we've had a great response from the civilian sector here in California. It makes me very happy, and it makes the soldiers very happy to know that there's people out there in organizations ready to support them and their spouses.
Great. By the way, Brenda is the P3O rep for Southern California out of Los Alamitos. So, General Smiley, do you have anything you want to comment on Work for Warriors, since that's a state program through the military department? Okay. So unfortunately, we didn't get our Work for Warriors.
I'm
Go
here,
ahead, sir.
Yeah. So yes, back in the Jerry Brown administration, he began a program for Work for Warriors that's been reinforced by the Newsom administration, and it is one of the most successful military run programs in the nation. It services any service, anybody coming into California, not just National Guardsmen. It is operated out of my headquarters here and run by some military personnel that we fund with state money. Incredibly successful in getting not only National Guard members, but Marine Corps transition, Navy transition, active component transition, into connected up with employers. And that program, in addition, we work with each of the individual service members coming in to help them produce a particular biography for the positions that they're looking for, and help them make that transition of taking military skill occupancy and transitioning that over to language that the civilians provide. And I would encourage any of our civilian employers on the line there, if you're not connected with Work for Warriors. You can just Google that, and you'll see where employers can make contact with us, and we will work with you in helping you increase your placement. And, I'd like to just take the opportunity here to advocate, as the Sergeant Major mentioned, what you're getting from a military person today. For our recruitment right now, we recruit less than 1% of the nation into our military specialties. And so we're in just as competitive environment as anybody else is out there looking for those great employees that we need to take on in the military world. And so you're getting back as a soldier, Marine, Navy, Air Forceman, a disciplined, diversified person who's a critical thinker, very technically smart, can pick up on things incredibly fast. And then as you move up into the ranks, the strategic thinkers. But the biggest strength that you get from a military person coming into your organization is they completely understand the power of working in teams and to address success. They understand that it is not individualism that achieves success. It is building and operating as a team member and achieving those goals and objectives inside of that kind of environment. So, if you're not connected with Work for Warriors, reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to introduce you to our program and be working on your behalf to fill your positions while we're helping our military personnel seek future employment. Over.
Great, thank you, sir. So one last comment is that we have a number of bridging programs, if you will, where we can get internships, any number of possibilities for people specifically coming off active duty, potentially going in the reserve program through these internships or whatever. So, Sergeant Major, you have any comments on that? Find the right button. You're still muted.
Go easy on me, Phil. My phone is really small and my hands are really big, and so it just kind of worked out that way. So I apologize to everyone. No, there is, there's all kinds of internship programs, and there's nothing stopping, an internship program that corporations have or companies have to do, on-the-job training as well for our Army Reserve soldiers or guardsmen, or part-time force. For the full-time force, absolutely. That's that skill bridge program, that transition assistance program that we spoke about, where actually for transitioning active component members, they can, the company can partner with the Department of Defense, and someone can sign up, and they'll be either 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, however long the internship's going to be. And the Department of Defense actually pays the soldier their salary while they're working with the company. And what that does is gives you kind of a test run to see what do you think about, Mr. McKee. Is he going to be an asset for your company or not? And also just to see, where maybe they best fit. We all know that, folks are hired through HR, and we think that they're hired for job number one, but really they're more qualified for job number 3 that's going to be coming open in maybe a few months. And so it really gives you an opportunity to assess that knowledge, skills, and attributes that person may have, and give them a good fit for your company. So those programs are out there, and I think one of the best things we can do is just make sure that create the network so employers know, hey, I don't know a lot about this. I can reach out to ESGR. I can reach out to someone on this call, and they'll help me work through it, because in the end, it's the network that we create that's going to cause the success. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Christine, I'd like you to comment on your discussions with the junior college program in the state of California, if you don't mind.
Sure, Phil. Thank you for that. Western Digital is building out a pilot program where we are partnering hopefully soon with community colleges and a couple of select universities. Here in the Bay Area, we have 2 manufacturing facilities, and we see an opportunity where we can build some flexibility, in particular, where we know that students need employment, just as much as we also know that our reservists and military need employment as well. And so what we're doing is we're looking at how do we create a partnership with community colleges and universities so that we can articulate access. We're actually looking at redesigning our tuition assistance program as well, because what we want to be able to facilitate is not just providing employment in our fab locations and such, but how can we actually build a career at Western Digital and go from being a student to working in our fabs to then becoming an engineering student, and then coming back and actually being an engineer. And so what we're doing is actually framing out a pretty healthy career path, if you will, showcasing what training requirements look like and such, but also re-examining our own internal practices where we can design more flexibility in being able to earn and learn, and then also show how we can support students in transitioning from part-time student, part-time work to full-time work in particular, in the hopes of really driving more STEM equity and leveling the playing field, if you will, for broader representation to be able to participate in technology roles. And so it's a lengthy approach, and it is a heavy lift. But we do have several partners, and I appreciate ESGR's partnership in particular, because you have taught us about a number of different programs that we're looking at tapping into, including SkillsBridge as an example, so that we can also start to see how we can expand the partnerships to showcase opportunities where we're not just looking at the students themselves, but how do we bridge between military and reservists, students, and starting to show a broader career path. And as I had spoken to Phil and to Joe and to Major General Davis a couple of months ago, employers have a greater responsibility, in my opinion, to be very forthright about the requirements of the technology roles that we currently have available and the ones that we also hope to fill in the future. And we have to do a much better job showcasing what those requirements are, so both the military and the programs and the training that many of our reservists and military women and men have, start to align to the future needs of technology companies. And the same thing has to happen on the education front. We have a responsibility to also showcase to community colleges and universities what those requirements look like today, but also how they're evolving in the future, so that we can meet these talent shortages and the requirements as a continuing evolving a requirement on technology overall. But that's the latest right now. We are still forming and framing out that pilot, of which point I hope that we're going to have everything well documented, including our internal support program on the Western Digital side, framed out by January.
Christine, this is Liz. I am not an engineer, but I am an educator. If there's anything that I can do to help you with the education system within the state of California, please don't hesitate to give me a call.
I appreciate that, Liz. Thank you very, very much.
But I could learn how to be an engineer, I guess.
You sure?
So your husband's a lawyer.
Yeah, I know.
Well, thank you all. This has been great. Basically, it's open forum at this point. So if any of you on the call would like to make some comments, I know we got a couple of new people. We have the civilian chief of staff for the 63rd joined us, Colonel Brown, who has a varied background, both civilian and military. Do you like to make some comments?
If I may, Phil, I'd like to make a few comments.
Yeah, you're coming up next, boss.
Oh, all right. I'm on the agenda. All right.
You are. So, since I'm not getting any comments, I'd like to turn the floor over to Brigadier General Combs, retired.
Well, hello, everybody. What a great forum. I just wanted to underscore the introductory comments because I know some of you missed them. But there are two things ESGR is passionate about. We really want to connect, and we struggled with figuring that out. We have since our inception. And one of the evidence of that is the number of engagements we actually accomplish every year nationwide. Because of that, we formed the ad hoc committee to look into ways that we can better connect with you, help you to serve those Guard and Reserve members that are your employees, that we want to stay with you and we want them to stay with us. And our partnership can really set the conditions where they feel comfortable. And if you, like myself, had an opportunity to review all the issues that come up from employers across the country, they really fall into some specific patterns. And of course, the first one everybody's pointed out is that there's a lack of communication with the Guard and reservists and their employer, and both own responsibilities in that. But we need to work hard on creating more open channels of communication and encouraging from both sides to open a dialogue. But the challenges have been out there is really understanding how duty is performed, whether it's involuntary or voluntary, and that the conditions for that remain the same, but it's oftentimes misunderstood if somebody is volunteering for a critical mission or an activity. Another thing that has been a challenge is the idea of notification and gaining or not gaining approvals. Approvals are not necessary, obviously, under the law, but we create the problem by not providing the employer the appropriate information. And we really want an opportunity to share that information in any manner possible. And another area that has been a struggle is, anybody that serves on emergency response under 30 days and opening that line of communication, because frankly, we're in the land of domestic crisis from day to day and day out. And obviously, if an individual serves less than 30 days, it's often hard to get the orders to them and get the connections working and so forth. So we hope to create through this dialogue, through this kind of a forum, how we can better achieve a connection, give you a point of contact, as an example, our volunteers who can work those issues for you, so you're not frustrated with the unanticipated absence immediately of a Guard or Reserve member. Another area that we find is a challenge is a misunderstood as a culture, military culture within the employer environment. We have found those that kind of look at our culture as part of their equity program or diversity and learning how to work with Guard and Reserve members. That doesn't automatically happen. It takes leadership, it takes understanding and sharing of information. And so these forums are really designed to open the dialogue. And I want to just give a hats off to all of you for piloting our effort, if you will, to open new lines of communication. And we are taking copious notes, trying to understand if we can figure out how the dynamic works here. Maybe we can apply the dialogue across the country. But I just want you to know from the national perspective, as the national chair had pointed out earlier, we've got to find a way to do this because the National Defense Establishment is absolutely dependent on the availability of Guard and Reserve to perform these missions. We simply cannot execute without it. That means you're forced into being a partner. And we don't want you to feel forced to do anything. We want you to feel like you're a valued partner and that we can work together to actually meet both our needs. But we just don't know what that formula looks like right now. This kind of a forum creates an opportunity to do exactly that. Thank you, Phil. That's all. I just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you. As usual, great comments. So the one thing that I would really like to emphasize is that we are really trying to reach out to more employers. So we've got a couple of employers on. We had a number that RSVP'd that said they couldn't attend. And we sent invitations to probably another 10 major employers in Silicon Valley, and we didn't get responses. So if you have some people that you know as employers or military that you would like to be part of this discussion, the next one of these we're going to have is in Southern California on January 20th. So we are looking to do something similar. So the whole idea is we want to get your ideas. How can we improve as ESGR to better support employers and the military and make our processes and policies better? So we do have a couple of questions. Brenda?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We actually hosted our first employer partner meeting here in Southern California this past November 8th. And despite the rain, we had a good turnout. We had about 20 employers, so they came in and I helped educate them on what does it look like to be a partner with P3, what are the benefits that they get, and also clarify how the Army Reserve differs from the National Guard, because a lot of them think that they do the same type of task of, getting activated on state missions and whatnot. But the turnout was great, and I got a lot of feedback from the employers too to kind of help me navigate the partnerships in this area and continue that or make the access to the soldiers a little more fluid so it's not so difficult as well. So yeah, let me know when you're coming down here because I would love to invite them. I know they have questions and suggestions. And yeah, they're very engaged down here.
Great, thank you. Another point that came up, and General Smiley might be able to address this, is the fact our Guard personnel can go on state active duty. They can get called by the governor as opposed to the president. And there's a whole new set of rules under the state of California. Sir, would you mind addressing that? And then Joanne will get to you.
Yeah, that's what makes the National Guard different than the rest of our components, is that we're a state force under the control of the governor until activated for federal operations, with the President of the United States. So 99.999% of our time is spent under the command and control of the governor of the state of California. And what makes us different is that we are available by the USC Code Title 32, available to the governor for emergency operations. And, I know those are an impact, to our employers. And so we do a lot of different things to attempt to try to reduce the load and the impact, not only to our own employees for call up, but to also the effects that it has with our employers. So some of the things that we do is that we rotate the force structure within California that is on an emergency call-up status. As you're probably aware, luckily this last year, our fire season was not as dynamic as it had been in the past. But we rotate organizations who will be eligible for call-up, potentially for firefighting duty. And so we try to make that in such a way that it will not be the same unit, the same employer, same employee being impacted, year after year after year. With those kinds of things, it just comes with the business of being a National Guardsman. And I want to thank all the employers, though, that support that. I think everybody understands, what the impact is to our state, what the impact is to our citizenry. And I can tell you that if the National Guard is being called out, as it was in Florida, to support the latest hurricane, it is our citizenry here, and possibly some of your employers who are not in service, that we're going out to respond and to assist and help. I will also tell you that, you know, we don't hang around on those kinds of missions. You know, we come in, we do the job that we were asked to do, and the Office of Emergency Services releases us from those missions as soon as possible. So, you know, it just is, it's dynamic, and you never know, you know, what kind of emergency might be called up upon. But if we are being called upon, it is because it is a dire need. We are the, you know, last in to support emergency operations, and we're the first out. So again, I thank all of our employers, you know, for supporting those missions. You know, we're out there, you know, rescuing people and saving lives, and preventing great property risk and damage. That's a benefit to everybody in California. And the residual of that is, you know, comes back, you know, threefold across the entire, you know, citizenry of California, because, you know, those are things that impact insurance rates and everything else that you can imagine goes and is involved in an emergency. So again, thank you for, you know, supporting our National Guardsmen every day. Over.
Well, thank you again, sir. And Joanna?
Hi, I just wanted to comment about Southern California. So we had our boss lift in the fall in Alameda, San Francisco area, and we're planning one in the spring in the Southern California area. So Brenda, if you're working with folks, we can get that information to you. And I think, you know, as we're talking, that communication is so important. And I think having employers have the opportunity to, you know, go to where their reservist is working and kind of see what they do and get some hands-on experience, I think it just brings a different level of understanding, and I think respect between both parties. You know, one, like, hey, my boss really cares what I do, and I'm in the reserve, and I get called on to go and perform that work. And then just kind of that both ways, again, just understanding what that reservist is doing. They're not just off, you know, having a vacation when they go to drill, or when they get called up to do an operation or a mission. Over.
Great. Well, I would like to thank all of you for taking time out of all your busy schedules. I mean, we've got some very, very senior leaders here that are always busy, and I am so thankful that you joined us, and we hope to make this program work and get our communication better and make ESGR better in California and throughout the nation.